Hello everybody and welcome back to another Retro Future Guy video. This is another build video that I'm doing. Yet another one that is largely Legos, adding in arcade parts to create, for this one, what I like to think is the ultimate at-home arcade joystick. So previously I'd done a smaller version of the joystick that just included the 8 action buttons and then all of the normal pinball ones that I do around the sides and front and back. But in this one, I wanted to throw pretty much everything into it. And this is the way that I like to do my retro gaming. Includes the joystick, the eight buttons, and then has a spinner, a trackball, and a second joystick so that you can play dual stick games on it, as well as all then the pinball stuff. So it has just about everything except for, like a Star Wars style flight yoke on it. But that second controller, where I use a Tron one that is a digital joystick that has a couple of extra buttons on it as well, trigger and a reflect button on the top of it, you could absolutely put in an analog flight stick in there. And because this thing uses a wooden backboard to it, a thin wooden backboard in addition to the Legos, it should be sturdy enough to handle just about any abuse that you throw at it. And depending on the controller and wiring harness that you get for this thing, you should be able to use it with PC, absolutely, and then Switch, PlayStation, whatever generation you have, Xbox, whatever generation you have. Pretty much anything that uses USB or a joystick, you should be able to make this work with that. So right now you're seeing that one of the differences between this and the all-button fighting controller that I did previously is that there is a double line of those. I think it's like a 1x8 or something, the Technique bricks, the ones that have the holes in them that are usually used for the construction of things that come in some of the construction sets. And that seemed to be pretty perfect with the way that I've lined up the bricks and the plates to stick in just about any kind of joystick that you want and anchor it to the backboard. So you would drill through the wooden backboard through those holes to create your guide holes, and then ultimately when you're connecting it, you just drive a screw through it. You're not wrecking any of the bricks because you're just going through the open holes, like two of them, or sorry, two top, two bottom, and anchoring that to the board behind it. And what that does is it gets around the problem that I think are sort of inherent with Legos in this kind of orientation, which is that any horizontal movement is going to be fine. It's not a problem. However, if you get into vertical movement, then you end up wrenching the pieces apart really quickly. I think a single game of Ms. Pac-Man would probably do that to you. So the solution to that was either to glue a big chunk of the pieces together or all the pieces together, and I definitely didn't want to do that, or alternatively anchor the thing to a thin wooden backboard. I think I used like thick wood, if I remember correctly, to do this, and that seemed to be sturdy enough while not making it super thick or super heavy, considering that you've got like two deep bricks on the top of it or two stud deep bricks on the top of it, laying on top of that wooden panel. So like all of my videos, you'll find the exact instructions and parts guide in the description. I am going through these videos, generally most of them at like 4x, just so I can talk through all of them without hopefully boring you too much. And I feel like they're reasonably complex to the point where you wouldn't want to try and build it alongside me at normal speed. It's probably easier to do it with the instructions and just listen to me talk more about the theory behind these things and some of the challenges that I ran into and solutions that I found. So yeah, you can either watch it multiple times if you're trying to build alongside this, or better still, just download the parts list and the instructions. So yeah, here I'm just creating the leftmost stick and the action buttons, and pretty soon I'll start adding in all of the other bells and whistles to this thing. As I said, all of this, or most of this, is two studs deep, so it uses a lot of the 2x4 bricks. But then there are certain things that required just one stud deep. And the two things that I mean specifically are the trackball, which has to sit closer up to the top of this thing than even two bricks would allow, let alone the backboard and the additional depth that that creates to this thing. But then also the Tron fighting stick that I use for the second stick in here also is not a very long neck to it, so that also needed to be pushed up a little bit closer to the device. I just did that one kind of in reverse, where you see the button holes that are here. They're the same size for the joysticks and the spinner and any of the 30 millimeter arcade buttons. What I did was I recessed the one one button hole, so those are 1x instead of 2x bricks, and you'll see what I mean when I get to it. But that's laid back against the wooden backboard, as opposed to the trackball that just cuts out a giant hole to allow the housing of the trackball to sit up against the top panel. I think that'll all become more obvious as you see it here in just a short while. So that is the way that I've found it is most comfortable for the 8 primary action buttons to lay out. And then what is in the bottom left is actually the spinner button as well. It's the exact same size as all the other holes. But originally I started out and I had the spinner to the right of this sitting underneath the trackball, but I found that the two were not very comfortable to use in that orientation, and that if you were trying to use the trackball for something like, say Marble Madness, that any kind of downward swipe you might connect with the spinner. So instead I put it in the bottom left, and I find that it looks good and it feels right. So the other nice thing is, with the way that I have positioned these things up a little bit closer to the top of this, is to allow for a larger bottom kind of wrist rest for you to put your hands and wrists on for longer gaming sessions and still be comfortable. As I'm building out this area right now, you'll notice I'm using a lot of the 1x bricks, and I keep on angling it up to just show you that those are 1x, not 2x ones. And this is where I'm putting together all the pieces that are needed for the trackball. And because the trackball housing is essentially like a 3+ inch square, it was necessary to have that pushed pretty flush up against the top of this. And so once again, I put in a couple of the technique bricks here, just a bunch of the double, they're like 1x2 bricks that also have 2 holes. There's some of those technique bricks only use 1, and I found that those were not properly spaced to allow for the screw holes with it, at least the trackball and spinner combo that I'm using. Incidentally, I should mention that while it'll be in the parts list and the instructions in the description of this thing, the one that I went with was the Glenn's Retro Show spinner and trackball combo that you can get on Thunderstick Studios. That's where I got mine, and it fits in here actually super well, and it's just a good device. In fact, all of the ones that they sell are. I think I probably own one of each of them at home. But anyway, yeah, because of the fact that you really need the trackball to be as close to the surface as you possibly can, it's not supported by the wood really, and it's because there's a big square cut out where the entire thing has to sit flush against just a one stud deep Lego brick. But it is not a problem. It's actually very, very sturdy, I've found. And you'll see why a little bit later on. Now you're seeing yet another one of the, I think it's, what is it, 1x8 of the Technique bricks that is there to support the second joystick controller. Depending on the joystick that you use, you could do this with just the same two deep button rings that I did for the left side one. But as I say, the neck is not very long on the Tron joystick, so I needed to recess it a little bit, hence the use of some 1X. It's only the white ring that I do on the right side is going to require it to be sunken in a little bit. All of the pieces that are around it actually stick out further, and it's fine. It still looks pretty good, and it functions exactly the way it should with the joystick in there. So if you have a joystick that doesn't have a particularly long neck to it, and you want to make sure that it's securely anchored to the wooden backboard, this is essentially the way to do it. You can see that that's a much thinner ring than the others by half. But it looks pretty good when it's in there. So yeah, this is the way that I like to do my gaming thing, mostly on PC. Although I do use consoles, I don't tend to use these kinds of controllers with them. But this works perfectly, depending on the kind of wiring that you set up for it. And that is the subject for a different video, because it's so dependent on the actual controller that you plug into, whether you're using a Brook fighting board or a like the Thunderstick Studios GRS Universal Encoder Hub board. And that thing is perfect to use for this. It's like a $50 board, but then it allows for different USB devices to connect to it, as well as a wiring harness. So that's definitely a good one to get for this particular build, because you're going to have multiple devices that you need to plug in. And, fewer cables is always better in any kind of build like this. Fewer to get snagged on, fewer to plug in anywhere else. And so if you can have that all going through one encoder board, it's pretty handy. So after I get in the last Technique bricks, which are the ones that have the holes in them, because I need to run screws through to anchor it to the wood panel behind it. This is a very quick finish to the faceplate, because it's just the same staggered 2x4 bricks and alternating rows that starts on the far left and right with the 2x2 bricks. And it's just going to do that essentially like the whole way down. So it'll be very, very quick. And I'll move on to some light woodworking, and then back to the rest of the base box to this thing, where all the other buttons are going to be housed and where the rest of the magic happens. While I didn't do it for this particular build, I think a future kind of add-on one to this that I'll do will show some examples of things that you could do to create sort of 8-bit retro looking art in the lower right-hand corner of this, all out of Legos. I just went very minimalist with the black and white thing, both just to make it simple, a little bit more cost effective if you're trying to build this thing and you don't necessarily need that art, which, the more pieces that you end up using to do that, the higher the cost. So this just seemed a simple and inexpensive way to do it and not extend the video. But I will show a couple of, I think, really cool examples that I've done that I will probably have on the final version of these, that are of this particular one that I keep for myself. So right now I'm going to start doing that light woodworking I talked about, starting with taking a pen or pencil to stencil around the inside of every one of these buttonholes, and try and keep this thing very, very stable for obvious reasons. You don't want to drill the hole in the wrong place and have it, cause you to have to take a Dremel to extend the hole size, because the Legos themselves are totally unforgiving. So you'll draw a little pilot hole dot into the center of each of these. If you don't feel confident doing it by hand, which I was doing, then take out a ruler and do it that way. And now it's time to go outside and do some woodworking. So get your power tools and get your drill bit that you're going to use to create the pilot hole, which is a good idea to make sure you get really close to the center of those things. Ultimately, you're going to use the 30 millimeter one for all of the button holes and the joystick holes, and then you're going to use that big 3.5 inch or 89 millimeter one just for the singular trackball hole that you need. And then, as you can tell, I also took a Dremel to it to make it more of a square with those slightly extended corners, because that's how the trackball housing is. And then from there, you're going to need to drill holes through the Technique bricks and into the wood that will line up with your joystick housings, because that is not one size fits all. Now, the way that I've got it laid out here should accommodate for a lot of different joystick controllers, but it's possible that you'll need to do some minor reconfiguration, and it could mean that you have to move a plate up or down a little bit. So you can fool around with it. You'll actually see that when I do the left one, I only put in 2 screws on it, not all 4 of them. And it's just because the particular one I'm using for the sake of this video didn't align perfectly, but I didn't want to mess up the bricks or the way that I was showing you to do the rest of this, because I think that a lot of controllers will work perfectly with the configuration that I've done here. So but you can see the pencil holes there. If I wanted to accommodate for it, they're slightly higher and lower than those other ones are. And that's where, I mean, you may need to just move the Technique brick, like above a plate or something like that to nudge it up just a little bit more. But the slight angle that I end up putting this one at is not a problem for either the, north, south, east, and west in the corner directions. I couldn't tell a difference, so it was completely fine for the sake of this video. You'll see what I mean when I start doing it next. But this Tron joystick takes a little bit of threading through that some other ones don't do, but ultimately it worked out fine. But you can see the little glimpses of the neck there. It's pretty shallow, so I had to recess the single line of Lego bricks to make sure that it would reach and allow the controller to move in 360. But yeah, see how that's ever so slightly off angle? Ultimately, as a perfectionist, I'd want to fix that on my ultimate one. But for the sake of this, and frankly, even if you were to do it that way, I don't think you would notice a difference in the way that it controls. So obviously I just moved off of the faceplate and onto the base, and I'm using 4 of those 16 by 32 base plates. I think there's limited sizes of those base plates as well, but I sort of like to make everything fit if I can on those 16 by 32s, either 1 or 2 or up to 4 of them. I don't think I would go any wider than this. I think it's already the weakest point of any of these builds. It sits on those base plates just because they're thin. They're thinner than even the normal plates by, I don't know, half to 2/3. Really, really thin and one-sided. So I think that that's the weakest point of any of these builds, and you just need to consider that if you're going to have any big device on your lap, you may want to have a cushioned lap desk or something like that, just so that your knees aren't coming into contact with that. You're really in no danger of collapsing the structure because it's super sturdy on the sides and the top, but you can push up through the bottom with kind of minimal effort just because of how thin those base plates are. So once again, I'm going through the process of building all of the buttons for the base box on this thing. And if you haven't seen any of my other builds, then essentially the things that you're seeing right now are the 2 sets of side buttons that you want for digital pinball. And those would be your left and right flipper and your left and right magna save slash left and right nudge buttons. And then on the front of the controller, I've got a whopping 8 buttons that you use for various functions, and one on the back of the controller. And you can map these and do whatever you want with them. I set them the way that I do, and sort of space them out from one another to kind of cluster things that do sort of similar functions, which will make more sense probably when you see it. But essentially, the front left one that I always want to be able to reach with my thumb is the vertical nudge that if you're playing pinball and you don't have an accelerometer based motion sensor as your board that you're plugging everything into, where if you're trying to nudge the table, you essentially bump the device or hit it with the palm of your hand, which you never want to do too terribly hard on a Lego based device, but you can do it absolutely. Uh, those kind of accelerometer based boards are really cool for pinball. But if you don't want to be slapping your controller around and you want to use buttons, that's why there's a left and right nudge or MagnaSave button, and there is a vertical nudge in the front left. And then next to that, I will generally put my select and start button or coin in and start button. And next to that, there's an additional buy-in button, which really you only ever need if you're a visual pinball fan, which I certainly am. Visual pinball, for those of you who don't know, is a program that was written. It's freely available. You can find it. There's a GitHub for it, but you can find it on VP Universe and VP forums, which are terrific resources for anyone who has even a passing fancy in digital pinball. It's got a terrific community behind those things, very, very vibrant, and so many talented artists that are working on replicating the original arcade pinball games from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Really, everything up until about 10 years ago, you can find a version of it there, and usually multiple versions, and done by different people, and they're usually fairly similar to one another, but you may find that it's easier to use one, or one looks slightly better than another one to your eye. But so cool. I really, really recommend that. And that buy-in button allows you to, some of the old school pinballs that you would play in the arcades would try and give you one last chance to feed it money while still in the same game. So even if you lost the 3 balls that you were playing with, or 5 balls if it was set to that, then you had the option to buy in with, I don't know, an additional coin or two to get one more try at a high score. So that is what I use one of those buttons for. You definitely don't need to dedicate one to it yourself if that's not a big thing for you. Use it for something else. The 3 that you see next to the rightmost digital plunger button are just menu buttons, and you can use those for pause, or you can use those for fast forward or slow down, or to bring up the tab menu, which you need for some emulators to play with the settings. So do whatever you want with that, but again, that's why I did the sort of 1 3 3 1 design. So you've got the front nudge, you've got the 3 coin and start and extra ball buy-in buttons, and then the 3 menu buttons, and then the digital plunger. So that's the method to my madness here. But you could absolutely, with minimal effort, bump these things all up against one another, or if you decide that you need fewer buttons, you could just replace those with some more of the 2x4 bricks on the front of your device, front of your controller. And then I told you that I was going to put one more button on the back. Usually I will make that my exit out of everything. Whatever program that I'm running, I'll make it an exit out of that software button. But the other nice thing that you can do is, depending on whether the joystick that you put in on the left side or even the right side, if the joysticks that you put in there allow for a 4 to 8 way choice, meaning some old arcade games like, Ms. Pac-Man or Donkey Kong used to only have you go in 4 directions, and quite a lot of old games only allowed you to go in those 4 cardinal directions. And for those, using an 8 way joystick that has diagonals, you can wonder why you're so much worse at playing things at home. And that's usually the reason why, is that you end up accidentally pressing things into corners, and then it doesn't recognize your moves to the north, south, east, or west on the joystick. So there are tools that you can use to automatically, through the software or manually through a button on the back there, that you can switch between 4 and 8 ways. And if you're a super old school arcade enthusiast like I am, then you may want the ability to switch manually or through the software to do that. So that's the rationale. You can either have that button on the back be the exit out of everything, or you can have it be a 2 function toggle button. Again, if you look at Glenn's Retro Show or Thunderstick Studios website, you will see that they have not only the 2 part buttons that have kind of a left and a right half to them that are perfect for things like, you press it on the left side and you choose 4 way, and then you press it on the right side and you're choosing 8 ways for your joystick. It's a really good spot for that as well. If you're not a crazy person like me who wants to have the exit out of the, whatever program or software you're running on the back of the controller, I think most people will probably want it on the front. So in that case, feel free to use that for the 4 to 8 way, kind of manual button. The reason that I don't do it, and you won't see it here, is just because in the software I've programmed it so that depending on the game that I'm trying to go into, it switches dynamically between. It's usually on an 8 way, but if I'm playing a 4 way game, then it'll switch to that automatically when it starts. So that's why I don't have 2 buttonholes back there. But you can do that as well. Okay, so as I finish building up the walls around all of the buttons, one of these days maybe I'll just make every single thing around the sides a buttonhole. But after I fill that in, you're going to see the next thing that I do is to take some of those 4x12 plates, and maybe some of the 4x8s as well. I'll go around the entire perimeter of the top of this thing, right above the buttons. And the reason that you need to have those plates there, and they're all kind of jutting into the center of the box, is because the faceplate that we built earlier needs something to rest on, and having the kind of 2 stud wide perimeter around the inside of the box will allow you to do that. And it's why I don't go right to the edge with the faceplate. There's always got to be a couple of stud widths, so that anything that you've got screwed into the bottom of the board, or the whatever joystick that you have underneath there, isn't connecting with the kind of perimeter lip of this thing that I've created. So if I put on a couple layers of those 2x4 bricks around it, and I think maybe some of the 2x8 plates, that should be the exact right height to put the faceplate, with the joystick and all the action buttons, basically sitting flush with the edges of this thing where those sloped curved bricks will come. And that's essentially your wrist rest, and keeps this from being super angular and uncomfortable to use. It should be at exactly the right height at that point. So I think I end this thing with a couple more layers of 2x4 bricks that aren't used. And the reason for that is this: if you end up wanting to to use a joystick that is super deep, that needs and this particularly happens actually when you use a deep joystick, that then you also want to connect the little add-on that allows you to do the 4 to 8 way thing that I spoke of earlier. That takes a lot of height that that you will need to kind of extend the top and bottom of the box. And so if you end up wanting to do that, then my recommendation is just take off the base plate, or the base plates, the 4 of them that are on the bottom, and just go around the perimeter with another set of 2x4 bricks, and then lift off the top 2 layers and that perimeter of the plates that the faceplate rests on, and put the other row there, and that will give you enough room for any kind of deep joystick. But I didn't want to add the extra cost unnecessarily for you to then have a super high device if you're not going to use something like that. So it's maybe a little niche that you would care enough to add one of those on to the bottom of a joystick, but it adds a lot of height to it, and so that's the reason that you see those extra bricks there that aren't presently being used. One other thing I want to mention about the extra large hole that I built around in the back, I was talking over it, but you'll see when I angle the back of this thing up, there's an extra large hole there. You could actually probably make that just the same size as every other buttonhole if you were so inclined. The reason that I did that was just so, see it right there, so that you could fit whatever cables that you needed to run in there. In theory, you should only need to run maybe 1 cable through there. But if you try and put a Raspberry Pi or a little single board computer, or I don't know, if you're a crazy person, put a power adapter in there, you could do that, but you'll just want to be careful about the amount of weight that you add onto those weak base plates in the bottom of this thing, because it can kind of pull the bottom out from underneath this. If you've got any questions or comments or observations about the build, absolutely put them in the comments section, and also take a look at the description section, because I'll be adding a parts list and the step-by-step instructions, linking those from there if you want to build one of these for yourself. If you like what you've seen here and want to help support the channel, then by all means like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, and you'll be notified at the point that we have new Retro Future Guy build videos, hardware and software reviews. There's a lot of stuff in the hopper, and there's a lot of stuff that I am currently editing right now that will be up soon, so love to share it with you. Thanks for being here.